Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Marcus always knew Sandra's success was inevitable. It wasn't a matter of luck or timing, it was simply unavoidable, given the unshakable determination that defined every aspect of her life. She had that kind of all-consuming obsession, the rare and impressive ability to turn vague dreams into real obsession, and then turn that obsession into something tangible, something you could touch, achieve, and celebrate. He deeply admired that about her, especially in the early years of their marriage, when her eyes sparkled with genuine passion and a sincere desire to overcome any obstacle in her path. But over the past 2 years, as Sandra prepared with almost religious dedication for the civil service exam that was supposed to change their lives forever, Marcus learned a bitter, unforgettable lesson that would alter everything. Deep admiration and continuous personal sacrifice are two very, very different things in real human relationships. Their routine had gradually hardened into predictable, exhausting patterns that made each day feel practically identical to the one before. Marcus woke up early, around 6 in the morning, to the vibration of his phone alarm, worked as a commercial manager at a tech company in Chicago, a job that demanded constant professional focus but that he could perform almost mechanically after so many years of repetition, and came home around 7 at night, completely drained from the day, only to find Sandra exactly where he'd left her that morning, seated at the desk in the living room, completely surrounded by thick legal textbooks that took up every available surface, fluorescent yellow and pastel pink highlighter notes covering every margin, coffee mugs she'd forgotten to drink from during hours of studying, and neatly arranged stacks of constitutional summaries spread out like a detailed map of her ever-intensifying intellectual obsession. He cooked dinner every night without exception, usually chicken with sweet potatoes, because Sandra had read in some scientific magazine article that it was healthier for the body and supposedly kept her mind sharp and alert at all times, and ate alone in silence in the kitchen while she whispered constitutional passages to herself endlessly in her study room, testing her memory over and over, reciting legal precedents from memory, repeating Supreme Court rulings until her pronunciation was absolutely flawless and untouchable. He listened to her murmurs as the constant soundtrack to a slow but steady abandonment. On weekends, while other couples visited close friends or took romantic getaways to planned destinations, Sandra attended private lessons with Felipe, a constitutional law professor respected in professional circles for his consistently impressive results. Felipe charged $500 per lesson, a significant amount that Marcus paid without questioning the necessity or cost, and had a well-established reputation for consistently and statistically documented success in helping candidates pass the police delegate exam. Marcus had only met Felipe twice, in brief, superficial encounters that barely lasted a few minutes. On both occasions, Felipe was in too much of a hurry, with Sandra always rushing out to arrive exactly on time for her private lessons, her eyes already darting toward the next urgent appointment, the next critical study session, the next goal that completely filled her mind. Marcus never questioned anything about those private lessons. He never asked direct questions about how they actually worked, how long they lasted, or what the specific content of the sessions was. That was simply the relentless price of Sandra's dream, and he was psychologically willing to pay it in full, without audible complaints or openly expressed resentment. When the official exam results were released on a Monday in April, under a clear sky and pleasant temperatures that promised a true spring, Marcus felt a wave of pure relief course through his entire body like a renewing electric current that reignited him. Sandra had placed first, not second, not third, she had claimed the absolute top spot on the list of approved candidates. He immediately called close friends he hadn't seen in months, her family who lived in 2 different states across the country, and coworkers he hadn't spoken to in even longer. He reserved the best Italian restaurant in Oak Park, a place they'd always passed by and promised to visit as a couple but never managed to go to, and invited 15 people, close friends who knew their full story together, blood relatives like uncles, aunts, and beloved cousins, and university classmates of Sandra's who deeply admired her. He asked them to prepare a special table by the large window facing the street, bathed in the golden afternoon light. He bought a bottle of 1999 Chianti, carefully selected with the help of an experienced sommelier who knew him by name and history as a frequent customer. He requested that imported French champagne be chilled for the toast he'd give with genuine enthusiasm. He ordered a custom cake that read "Delegate Sandra" in dark artisanal chocolate letters. He organized everything perfectly, every detail thought through and reconsidered multiple times. Everything that day made crystal clear, absolute sense, every sacrifice he'd made without complaint, the countless dinners eaten alone in deep silence, the lonely nights while she studied obsessively without pause, the repeatedly postponed Mexico vacation plans that never materialized year after year. His marriage stood on solid, unshakable foundations, or so he sincerely believed with every fiber of his being, and now they would finally share the fruit of the joint effort and dedication he'd patiently built. Marcus had invested absolutely everything in that success, not just financially, through rising tuition and expenses, but emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, with every fiber of his human existence. And now he would reap the meaningful reward of having been precisely the kind of man who supported his partner without questioning, without constant complaining, without demanding genuine reciprocity or mutual, balanced attention. But before the party happened, before any organized celebration, before any solemn toast was raised, Sandra asked to talk to him privately that night. They were in the bedroom Marcus had painstakingly renovated. Sandra stood by the window, deliberately avoiding his eyes in an obvious and painful way, that nervous manner that clearly signaled decisions had already been secretly made long ago and were now being revealed to the world in an irreversible way. Marcus sat on the edge of the king-sized bed they'd bought together a few years earlier, the same bed where they'd slept side by side but emotionally separated for months without real, deep communication. He waited with painful anticipation, his heart already sensing what was coming. "Marcus, I need to be honest with you about everything," Sandra began, her voice trembling slightly, that tremor rising from the deepest part of her chest. "Over the past few months, during my intense studying, developed feelings for Felipe. Feelings that go far beyond professionalism and academic admiration. Feelings I can no longer deny to myself or hide from myself." Marcus heard every word clearly, as if submerged in deep, dense water, each syllable arriving distorted but intelligible to his ears. There was something disturbing beyond the words themselves, it was the verb tense she'd deliberately chosen. Developed. Continuous past tense. While she obsessively studied in the living room, while Marcus supported her unconditionally without question, while they made travel plans that never left fragile paper, while he sacrificed his own deep personal ambitions and long-held desires. "And what exactly are you telling me with all this?" Marcus asked slowly, though he already intuitively knew the full, devastating answer that was coming. The specific details were unnecessary and would only cause more accumulated pain. There was only one possible ending to this story being told with such calculated coldness. The details were merely superficial variations on a theme that had already been played out, lived, and internally completed long ago. "That I can't be here with you anymore, Marcus. You've become completely invisible in my life over these years. Felipe understands me in a way you never truly could, or even tried to properly. He sees me as a whole, complex person, as someone with legitimate and important ambition. You can't see that in me because you're too focused on yourself and your limitations. You accepted invisibility as a position of comfort, and I accepted your invisibility too for a long time, but it completely suffocated me from the inside, like I was drowning in sand. He makes me feel alive again, Marcus. He makes me feel important." Marcus felt each word like a direct punch to the chest that left him breathless, each one collected and stored inside to reopen wounds in the future that would never fully heal. "So you're breaking up with me, then? Now? On the very day you should be celebrating your hard-earned victory?" "Yes. I'm ending it today, Marcus. I need to leave this house by the end of the week. Felipe has already arranged a new, nice apartment for us to live together. I deserve this, believe it or not. I deserve to be with someone who sees me completely, who understands the true magnitude of who I am as a whole person." The party was hastily cancelled an hour before it was set to begin. Marcus called the restaurant with some excuse, an urgent family emergency, a tragic accident without specifics, lies that slipped from his mouth like cold water. People received messages about the changed plans without explanation. No one asked many details about the sudden cancellation. Nobody really wants to be the bearer of bad news to others. In the days that followed, Sandra moved out of the house with suitcases and boxes that Marcus helped carry to the taxi, an automatic gesture, the reflex of a man trained over 14 years of continuous marriage to care for her, even as she utterly shattered him without mercy. He carried 2 large-wheeled suitcases, a carry-on bag holding her important personal documents, and boxes full of her law books that she'd highlighted with colorful markers during months of intense, dedicated study. He watched her get into an Uber waiting outside with the engine running. He watched the car disappear down the street and turn at the first corner, taking away the life he'd patiently built. Then Marcus did something he'd never done before in his entire adult, working life. He systematically and meticulously investigated someone as deeply as possible. He started simply, almost accidentally in origin, but determined and methodical in careful, deliberate execution. Marcus asked Felipe for his number, to arrange lessons too, now that the marriage was over and he could finally focus on himself and his personal well-being, a convenient lie that Felipe readily accepted with suspicious enthusiasm, sending a WhatsApp number with a thumbs-up emoji that seemed to carry deep, unspoken layers of meaning. With the number in hand, Marcus hired a highly recommended private investigator, something he'd never considered doing in his entire life, but that now seemed essential for his mental survival and psychological sanity. He needed to deeply understand who this man was, the one who'd stolen his ex-wife and his peace, who'd cooked their shared dreams into a bitter dish of brutal rejection and abandonment. What the investigator found wasn't just a simple case of reckless, fleeting romantic infidelity. Felipe Rodriguez had 3 completely different names in verifiable public systems. 3 full names with official, verifiable documentation in government records. In separate registries, in databases across geographically distant cities, Denver, Phoenix, Austin, Miami, there were documented, proven stories of Felipe romantically involved with women in specific, vulnerable situations that repeated with alarming, mathematical precision. Ambitious women in critical periods of transition, women undergoing significant professional change, women obsessively focused on major personal achievements. All described the exact same hypnotic pattern. Felipe appeared as a respected professor or admired intellectual mentor, quickly and deeply built emotional intimacy in an engaging way, then simply vanished when things started getting serious or when the woman stabilized professionally. Marcus found fake social media profiles of Felipe with different phone numbers on each virtual account. He found detailed stories on online forums from women who'd been specific victims of his calculated, cruel manipulation pattern. One had failed an important exam because of the emotional distraction Felipe deliberately caused. Another had fatally erred by telling everyone about the secret relationship and then felt the public humiliation of his sudden, unexplained disappearance. The discovery that hurt Marcus the most was simple, devastating, and irrefutable: Felipe was legally married. Fully married in 2 different states simultaneously, during periods that chronologically overlapped in a way impossible to deny. He had 2 legitimate children he'd never mentioned to Sandra, children who lived with his ex-wife in Phoenix and who sincerely believed their father traveled constantly for work, when in reality, he was seducing women in other cities with stories practically identical to those he'd told their mother. Marcus felt rage burn through his veins like liquid fire consuming everything irreversibly, but there was something deeper than pure anger in that critical moment. It was crystal clear, cold, precise clarity about exactly what needed to be done and how to do it. It wasn't physical revenge. Violence was for people lacking intellectual creativity or strategic intelligence. It wasn't direct confrontation with Sandra. What for, when she'd already made her choice consciously and deliberately? It was justice. Simply, well-executed, calculated poetic justice. For 3 weeks, Marcus gathered more information, compiling everything in chronological order with screenshots, digitized documents, and timelines showing the repetitive pattern. He waited for the exact moment. He knew Sandra would be summoned to the official swearing-in ceremony as a civil police delegate, an event scheduled for 3 weeks after the exam results, in early May. That was the perfect place. Public. In person. With all the professionally important people in Sandra's life gathered in one location. On that Tuesday afternoon in early May, Marcus went alone to the police station where the ceremony was taking place. He saw Felipe arrive arm in arm with Sandra, that calculated smile now displayed for the entire audience and the photographers scanning the hall continuously. Sandra wore a formal black suit that Marcus had bought for her. Felipe circled her possessively. But there was another man there too, someone Marcus had identified through careful, methodical investigation after weeks of researching records, Felipe's ex-husband, whose name appeared on divorce documents dated 7 years earlier. The ex-husband was there because he worked in another division of the civil police, a coincidence Marcus had seized upon. During the cocktail reception following the official ceremony, Marcus discreetly approached Felipe's ex-husband. They spoke briefly and strategically. Marcus didn't make accusations, he simply offered the folder containing organized documents, digitized public records, verified alternate names, photographs of Felipe with different women in different chronological periods, and a detailed, dated summary of Felipe's systematic predatory pattern maintained over an entire decade. The ex-husband read everything slowly, his expression gradually and visibly shifted from initial confusion to penetrating clarity to contained, controlled anger. "He did the same to me," he said simply, his voice low but firm. "I came out of that relationship completely traumatized, truly believing I was the problem in the dynamic. I have kids who think he's absent because he wants to be, not because he's a sophisticated, high-level professional manipulator." That night, the ex-husband discreetly shared the information with important people in the department where Sandra now worked as a new delegate. He didn't confront Felipe in front of her during the ceremony, he simply ensured the information reached the right people through appropriate, protected channels. A delegate cannot be romantically associated with someone under investigation for systematic fraud and documented identity crime. Professional reputation is everything in that highly regulated career. 3 days later, Felipe disappeared from Chicago. He simply vanished, as he'd done before in other geographically distant cities, leaving a vague email about urgent family emergencies requiring his immediate presence in Denver. Sandra called Marcus a week later, once reality finally hit her with full force. Her voice was completely different, no longer elevated by unshakable certainty, but broken by slow, painful, overwhelming understanding of her own actions. She'd discovered everything about Felipe through her own frantic, desperate investigations. She'd obsessively researched every detail, found online stories from other women in identical situations and unmistakable repetitive patterns, and realized far too late that she'd destroyed her marriage for an illusion that evaporated in just weeks. She offered sincere apologies during the call, pleading. She asked to talk in person. Marcus gently declined, not out of cruelty or revenge, but because there was simply nothing left to discuss that could be repaired. He'd offered unconditional support, constant self-sacrifice, love that bordered on self-loathing. She'd chosen to disregard all of it, chosen his invisibility as the main reason for rejection, when in truth, she'd been blind to everything he'd genuinely offered. Marcus spent the following months like a man slowly learning to live in a body unfamiliar to him. He'd lost far more than a marriage, he'd lost a fundamental belief that effort and loyalty were real currencies in human relationships. But he'd also gained something invaluable, absolute clarity about who he was as a person. He reconnected with friendships he'd completely neglected. He traveled to places he'd indefinitely postponed, Colorado, California, Utah, Arizona. He requested a significant promotion at work, something he'd never considered while constantly tending to Sandra's career. He got the promotion. His colleagues noticed something fundamentally different, healthy determination, genuine focus coming from within him, not from a desperate need to appear right to someone else. 2 years after the final divorce papers were signed, Marcus met Catherine at a corporate innovation conference in Denver, by chance, without planning. She was an executive at a reputable sustainability company, a woman who'd built her own career without sacrificing her relationships. Unlike Sandra in absolutely every way, she didn't call him invisible, she saw him completely. When Catherine worked on an important project, Marcus offered natural, healthy support, never destructive self-sacrifice. Catherine asked him not to even do that. "I want you here with me, not disappeared into my work," she said sincerely one night. Marcus understood there were people who valued genuine support without demanding complete disappearance. Sandra navigated a career that had begun irreparably tainted. The connection to Felipe circulated through internal whispers that didn't fade easily. She was transferred to a police station in a distant Chicago suburb. She kept working, performing her duties adequately, but the feeling of having achieved something grand had turned into the feeling of having built something on quicksand that the wind had blown away. A few years later, Marcus saw an online news article while having coffee with Catherine. Felipe had finally been arrested in Denver on multiple charges of fraud, identity crime, and systematic breach of trust. Documented victims had come forward publicly, a federal investigation was involved, verified relationships existed across 3 states, and false identities had been created for each woman and specific context. Marcus didn't feel satisfaction when he read the full news. He felt only serene, quiet recognition that justice, even when delayed, inevitably and inexorably finds its way. He never spoke about his role in it to anyone except Catherine, who found out by accident. Catherine didn't judge, she understood Marcus had done what he believed was right. Marcus simply knew he'd done the right thing, he'd exposed the truth in a way that allowed truth to defend itself, without needing violence or destructive dramatic confrontation. Life continued its natural course. The years passed. And Marcus finally learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't against those who hurt us, but simply living well and happily despite them. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.